so what if someone thinks you're weird? Not everyone has to like the work that you create. When I'm a quality versus quantity person, despite how many dance videos I put out.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 14 of the Focus Stack podcast. Thank you, everyone who's been watching all the shows and checking it out. If you're new to the show, please feel free to subscribe to the show on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, whatever you prefer to listen to shows on. Also, if you like to follow the show on Instagram, I do post some shorts and updates on new episodes that come out. So please, if you're interested, come follow us there. Also, this is something that's just kind of getting started, but we do have a Patreon set up. It's $3 a month to become a Focus friend, and basically it just helps me pay for the streaming software that we're using here. Also, I put posts in there that say, upcoming guests are this person with their link, and you're able to ask questions in advance of the show, so I can then ask the guests when it's time. And lastly, if you're a photographer and you want to be on the show, there is a link in the description on all the different platforms where you can sign up to be a guest. Basically, you just put your portfolio URL in there, and then I check the form, and then we set up a time to meet for the show. So with all of that out of the way, I am really excited to introduce our guest today, and I feel like I need to just kind of read this description right here, just because I feel like I want to make sure I get everything in, and I don't want to miss anything. Our guest is Carol Record. Carol is an interdisciplinary artist, educator, designer, and game creator, working at the intersection of spirituality, memory, metaphysical inquiry, and human experience. Through photography, design, and storytelling, and game-based learning, she explores the unseen. And before I bring Carol on, I just want to mention that, Carol was actually a good friend of mine, or two good friends of mine. They're students in Alabama, and Carol has since gone on to get her master's degree and become quite a talented educator, designer, photographer, and game designer. And just with all of that, I'm just going to go ahead and welcome Carol to the show. Hello, Carol.
Hi, Jim. Thank you so much. That's really sweet. That's Doug Clark and Sarah Miles were like quite amazing. And both, I learned very different things from each of them, and I'm very thankful for them. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have met you.
That's true. Yeah, we met at SPE in, where was it? Was it Philadelphia or Atlanta?
Possibly Philadelphia was my first one.
Okay.
I think, what was that, 2011, 2010, somewhere around there?
That seems right, yeah.
Yeah, it was one of those 2 years, and it was a really big and transformational experience for me, not just as a person, an artist, but also as a photographer. I'm born and raised in Alabama. It's a very small community, and the college I went to, there might be like one or two other people that were really passionate about the work that they were working on. Going as someone from a rural area, it was my first time on a plane. It's my first time attending any sort of professional conference, and going and being surrounded by so many other people that were, I felt like someone that had been starving for connection and to be understood for so long. And I didn't even need these other people to understand me. Just seeing that they existed, I was able to take that knowing with me back home to Alabama, and like that bit of community and knowledge sustain me and help, keep my passion for photography and things going, just to know that those kind of people exist in the world.
So just to go back a second, SPE is the Society for Photographic Education. And Carol and I were just in Reno for the most recent conference, back in March of this year.
And that was a lot of fun. We had such a great group this year, and it was a little overwhelming. I don't recommend being a speaker, a volunteer, and an exhibitor all at the same time, but it was really great, and I had a great experience there. I presented on game-based learning, had a table for the card game we'll talk about in a little bit, and it's just SPE is one of the best communities that I've ever been a part of. And I think that I've always loved photography, but SPE is just, it really is like a treasure. Like the people are so fantastic, so supportive. The conferences are so well done. I'm not trying to sell SPE, but at the same time I am, because it by far, the conference, going to SPE in Philly as an undergrad student, that was the most influential moment for me as an undergrad student. Like that had a profound effect on me and on my inspiration moving forward. So
Yeah, the same thing happened to me back in 2004, the first time I went to an SPE conference. So it's just a really great community to be a part of. I'll drop the link down in the bottom here for people to check out later. So, Carol, one of the things that we like to start the show out with is to have you talk about your photographic journey. Like, how did you get from there to here as a creative person?
my photographic journey, well, first, I've had a love of photography for as long as I could remember. I was a daddy's girl, and my dad always had a camera in his hand. And I very quickly learned that that was his love language. That was his way of showing and expressing love. He was a man that did not have an easy time with words. So he showed you through his actions, and so he was always documenting things. He wanted to preserve things. And I inherited that love from him. So for me, I think I got my first camera. It was like a little 110 camera in junior high. And I was always taking pictures of my friends, of my family, of myself. Of course, as a girl, me and my sister were always dressing up and like posing and modeling and stuff. So it very quickly was both, it became my own love language. If I take a picture of someone, I obviously care enough about them to want to preserve that moment or something about that moment. And when I see other people taking pictures, to me, it's a form of love. You know, I mean, you want to save this moment, and that's a very special thing. And then on the other hand, photography as a form of creative expression, and just having fun, or whether it's dressing up and playing pretend and making games, or taking photos of really silly things, or moving along down the journey and starting to get using photography as a tool for exploring the world. Like I love light. I've always loved, noticing the little things, the things that other people don't pay attention to. And I like to use photography both as an exploratory tool, but also as a way for me to shift my mindset. I have a long history with depression, PTSD, and other things in that area. And photography for me I feel like it saved my life a lot. Like it's helped bring me back. I remember this period of time where I was really depressed. I was living in this house that was falling apart as I can't remember if I was still an undergrad, if it was right out. And I was going through this weird limbo time, and I was just so depressed, and I knew I was depressed. And what I did very intentionally was I pulled the camera out and I started forcing myself to look for the beauty in all the chaos, whether it was the way the light was shining through a curtain, or it was the old, flaky paint on a windowsill that's falling apart. But finding the beauty in what a lot of people would consider ugly or, tacky or whatever, looking for that as a way of, I didn't know how to articulate it as well back then, but now you could compare it to, people are told, repeat positive affirmations, we do all these things to try and basically reprogram your mind to shift from noticing and looking for the negative more than the positive. So I've used photography as a tool for a very long time to help me focus more on finding the positive, like this is a freaking mess, but man, look at that color, look at that texture. Oh man, look at that shape. It's a pretty cool shape right there. Like and when you start using photography like that, it becomes this kind of really fun hybrid of both like a scientific tool, a tool for documentation, creative expression, and play that brings a lot of joy to me.
Well, that's really enlightening here. I wonder maybe we should go ahead and see some of your work. What do you think?
Sure. Let's go ahead and look at it.
All right, so I have your website pulled up here, and we have some tabs where we're going to visit some specific projects, right?
Do you want to start with the Me Too project, probably?
Yeah.
So a lot of my photography, I experiment a lot because photography, so I'm a photographer and a graphic designer. And graphic design is the thing that I do to solve problems and to, make that side of my brain happy and generally to be of service, a little bit more of service to other people. Whereas photography is like my own personal art form most of the time. And some of the work that a lot of my work is just exploring different things, different materials, different, just playing. But the series that I've worked on the most cohesively are basically images and stories from my own life. I've been through some pretty big things in my life, including what we're looking at right here. So this series is my Me Too series. The Me Too movement went viral, I think, in around 2017, maybe 2016. My experiences happened way before then, but I started working on this at that time, both partially because of the movement, but also because I always knew that I wanted to do something with my story and that I would probably do something with it in grad school. So I've had quite the history with sexual assault, but the biggest and worst thing to ever happen was I was assaulted multiple times by my ex-stepfather from the age of 13 to 15. And then I came out about it. I think I was in the 9th or 10th grade when I came out about it. And then it took 3 more years. For 3 years, I was in and out of court. We did go to court. And I am very proud to say that of people who report sexual assault, less than 3% actually go through all the legal and court stuff. And there's a reason for that. It's very traumatizing, that experience. But at the same time, I'm proud that I did it. I'm the eldest of 3 siblings, and I've always kind of felt like it's my duty, if I'm strong enough to, to fight or stand up for something, to do that. But that I have this period of my life because I went through that and that experience with our final court thing, the end of my senior year of high school. And I didn't really realize at the time, but I had severe PTSD as a result of it. And so I have like about a decade of my life right there, including my early years in undergrad, that I call my dark ages. And I struggled with so many things so hard because, I didn't really realize what was going on with my brain. I just realized that things weren't working. And one of the ways that impacted me, and one of the ways that photography helped me, was I ended up having memory issues related to trauma, like severe problems with disassociation and stuff like that. And for quite a while after these experiences, my brain wasn't remembering things. So for me, photography became a really important tool to help me remember and know what was going on in my life and to track patterns and things, because my brain just couldn't hold on to short-term stuff. But this series right here, I started working on in 2017. And basically I scanned old family photos and court documents. And like this one right here is one of the police reports that I made. And it's the notes that the detective wrote. And other, I've always collected like all of the kind of like scrapbooky type things and documentation stuff. And I composited those together digitally to create digital negatives. And then this particular series was created through a laptopogram process where I made the digital negative and I held silver gelatin paper to the screen and used a laptop as an exposure unit before processing it in the darkroom. And for me, at the time with this series, that process was important for me because I think around 99 or 2000, I started, even though I have an analog upbringing, I really attached myself to the internet and digital culture and stuff. And so for me, going through that process of scanning these images, reprocessing them and compositing them in order to express what was my feelings and what was going on at the time, to express things that I wasn't able to express during this period. like that was my way of kind of me taking back control and giving myself a voice, and then basically transmuting it from this digital thing into a physical object and going through that chemical process of exposing the prints and stuff. It felt, I mean, it was alchemy for sure. And so that process of going from digital to physical was important to me for this. And I'm really proud of this series. It's won several awards, and I can't tell you how many people have reached out to me just to share their own experiences. And that's one of my big things as a survivor. I feel that it's important to share my story so that other people know that they're not alone, and to help raise awareness for others so that people's families will ideally be a little more prepared or understanding, because it's fascinating how the mind, just all of the mental things that I had to work through, the disassociation, all of that kind of stuff, and just working through all that trauma takes so long. And so for me, these images, when you're able to finally take this stuff that's inside of you and get it out into something, it's like, it's like I was digging out some poison and transmuting it and then creating these art and storytelling objects. So it was a really nice healing moment. And in these, you can see, like, that's my stepfather and my mother. Like, I cut out figures. It's like, I don't want this there. Or I cut out eyes because no one suspected what was going on. I used, the documents and stuff to layer and add meaning. And, you can kind of pick up pieces of the story if you look at it. There's meant to be like a slightly mysterious quality to it at first. And then if people want to know about it, then they can read the captions that go with things and stuff. So that was me in the room that I was first assaulted in.
That's a really powerful body of work.
Thank you. I hope to continue with it at some point in the future, because I have had so many people that have reached out to me because of it. And I don't think there are enough people making work like this. And I think one of the problems is that people that are making work like this, a lot of times it's younger people. When people are trying to work on stuff like this, perhaps in undergrad, from some of the stories that I've heard, and their mentors just don't know how to support them or to guide them through it. I feel like I'm glad that I worked on this in grad school, and now I'd be good to work on it my own. But undergrad, I wasn't ready. I was too, when it comes to, I'm a big advocate for using art of any sort as a therapeutic tool and as a tool for healing. But you often need to let some time pass before you're ready to tackle it, because I actually had planned on my Me Too work, on this being a bigger thing and this being my MFA thesis project, it being about this. But the first semester I was back in school, I was in a research class, and I was doing all the research. I was interviewing crisis counselors and all these different people that interact with victims when they come forward, and studying about the mental stuff. And it stirred stuff back up for me. And I started having night terrors again. And what I realized is that this kind of stuff, you work on it when you can and in small chunks. You don't want to fully go back into it, because it can, it can just reactivate everything.
Yeah, I can imagine that's a real risk of kind of doing that deep dive into traumatic experience like that.
And it's a good thing to dive in if you're ready. I think that's one of the things. It's just like only the person that's experiencing it knows whether they're ready or not. And I thought that I was good. I have been good talking about it for a long time. But when I was reading about it and just really finally starting to understand why my mind, like if I wasn't around, if other people were around me, like wondering why did nobody notice? Why did nobody suspect? And one of the things that was hard for me to understand was when there were other people around, it's like he was two different people to me. It was like Dr. Jekyll.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. And when there were other people around, my brain felt safe. And so my brain turned off the switch that remembered what he was doing to me. Like my brain was disassociating and blocking it out as much as possible. It was only when we were alone or that my spidey sense would go off, and then my memory would come back. And it's such an interesting experience to know that you have had all these memories, but your mind is only selectively allowing you to access them at certain times. And I don't know, there's so much that you could go into just with that. But, so when I started trying to think about, like, why is it so hard for people to believe people when they come out and stuff like that? I understand why it's hard, because, a lot of times the victims themselves are struggling with memory issues and trauma and shock. And it's a lot, but I'm thankful that this work has reached so many people. And I won the very last year of the PD and EDU student competition, which was right before the pandemic, or the first year of the pandemic. Yeah. I won best in a grand prize in fine art and personal work for this series, and that was a really big thing for me as a photographer and artist, and as a student, because I've always struggled with, I don't think I'm good enough, or my work isn't as amazing with this or that, and then here I am. One of the things I do think I do best is, like, share my stories and be open about them and stuff. So it was so meaningful that this being, like, the first real series that I had made, and it being so personal, was recognized, and it was just really special.
I would agree that storytelling is a part of you that's very significant. And I think maybe this is a good opportunity to switch over to the pandemic, because I was here in Colorado watching on Instagram as you were going through some pretty serious COVID related experiences. And I was wondering, maybe you want to share a little bit about that.
Okay, so let me just say this. I am a weird person. I swear. I volunteered to be a guinea pig on this planet to experience things. So it was a very scary time. But basically, long story short, I got COVID in 2020. I had to be hospitalized with COVID and pneumonia. I was in the hospital for about 16 days after having already been sick with COVID for quite a bit. And oh my goodness, it was a roller coaster. I had a the biggest PTSD flashback experience I've had, I think on day 4 or 5 while I was there. And then I think it was day 7, because here's why. You have to remember at the beginning of the pandemic, this is when people were in full hazmat suits to come into the hospital. There were no visitors. It was very isolating. And also, as part of that, like, the staff were not coming in very often. So it was really weird to feel kind of like a prisoner in this space. And I had a PTSD episode related to my Me Too experiences, because my mom worked at that hospital, and it was when she would be out of town working there on the weekends, is some of the time that my ex-stepfather would have access to me. So I had that. And then on day 7, the magic happened. At the time, they were calling it steroid psychosis. I've since professionally, it's been labeled an altered state of consciousness, probably triggered by all the steroids I was on. But on day 7, I got up out of my hospital bed, and the whole atmosphere felt weird. And basically what I experienced was something else in my body. I was fighting for control of my arm, because I had an IV in this arm, and that had been bothering me for a few days. I asked them to change it out, but they didn't want to come in very often. And it was first the whole experience of, I'm like over here trying, like, I knew something wanted to pull it out, and then it finally did. And basically my experience was, you call it whatever you want, but, like, God came into my body to scare me awake. And during the rest of my hospital stay, I kept fluctuating between being lucid and being, like, in psychosis or an altered state. And I had all of these crazy experiences. And then I'm a problem solver. So I was trying to figure out, okay, am I crazy? Like, what is going on? Because sometimes I would be, like, fully in this experience. Sometimes it was like, the way I experienced it was God was either in control of my body and speaking through me. I have videos that he made for me at this time. There was one night. So let's see, looking at the images, scroll up. We'll talk about these in order. I divided my psychosis or my experience into 3 phases. So, okay, so this one, my soul is in this clock. So one night I'm in this bed and I perceive God's consciousness in that clock talking to me. And then the next thing I know, my consciousness is in the clock looking down at my body on the bed, and he's in my body. And I mean, like, I've never done like hardcore drugs or anything like that. I'm like, what in the world is going on? So like that was, so you can see some of like the notes and the things. So like says COVID, I was trying to theorize what was going on. Okay, this is the COVID fog. Or like there's a letter in the background, my husband had sent a note like all concerned, but down in the bottom with the red letters, Carol Jesus, CJ, because I had divided my state into 3 phases. There was the Carol Jesus phase where God shows up telling me that I'm the second coming of Christ because he wants to show the world he has a sense of humor. I mean, and what's funnier than, like a fat white chick from Alabama that's addicted to video games and doesn't have kids, and I don't like labels, but fits all of the labels, And then there was, let's go to another one. And then this one, oh man, this one was probably the most interesting. I had a near-death experience. There were a few times that we were really worried about me. I don't know how close I actually came to near death, but I had a near-death experience where I went down the tunnel and all of that kind of stuff. And so this one is shifting realities, and I call it Lab Rat. And the reason for that is I had this experience of going down a tunnel, and the first experience is kind of being this like, it looked like a video game city to me, but now I'm like, oh yeah, that was definitely my brain's idea of heaven. It was this golden white city in the clouds that looked a little bit like Asgard and Stormwind from World of Warcraft. And they were angels speaking to me. They didn't have visible wings, but I sensed something and I knew they were angels. And I heard bells in the sky that they didn't seem to hear. And then the next thing I know, we're in like a monastery type thing and they're reprimanding me. They say they don't like it when I say God's name. I'm like, what? I just call him God. But then the next thing, and it's so weird, the phasing, it's like I phased, like I'm in quantum leap or something, but I phased into this different state where I am bacteria in a petri dish and God is on the microscope looking at me.
So wait, you go into the body of the bacteria? Do you like see your reflection and say, oh boy?
No, it was like 1 second I'm in this city in the clouds talking to angels in a monastery, and the next second I am bacteria. Like I am this little thing of like kind of goo. I remember being kind of green. And then in that experience, I shifted from being bacteria at one point. And I remember God shocking me. He had like a little glass wand with like a blue light, and he shocked me. And I remember it was a very visceral experience. Being like, no, what in the world? And then I become like the cutest, fluffiest little green caterpillar that you've ever seen. And there were some other caterpillars, and God told me he was trying to figure out why I was so different from the other ones over here. And there was a whole lot of conversation and stuff like that. And then, and then I kind of phased back into the hospital. And when I did, I kind of had this, and it probably only lasted moments. When this stuff is happening in your mind, it can seem like forever, but it goes really fast. But I had like a Helen Keller type experience where I was conscious in my body, but I couldn't communicate. I couldn't see. I could barely hear. And like slowly my senses came back. But just that one experience, like, and I've since like listened and read about other people's near-death experience. I didn't realize it was a near-death experience at the time. And then just a lot of things happened. I realized, obviously that was like a heaven type thing and all this stuff. I'm over here thinking about video games. That shows where my mind is. It reminded me of Stormwind. But like,
meanwhile, the rest of us are watching you from the hospital. You're posting on Instagram and we're all going, oh my gosh, what is happening?
I know that my family kept trying to get the hospital to take away my devices. Now, I don't think I shared like the juiciest stuff, but I still have a lot of those live streams. And I mean, I understand why people were so worried. They're hard to watch because I mean, I'm obviously like out of it. And even if the words coming out of my mouth and my thought processes, seem right, just seeing somebody, that's so obviously sick, and eyes and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there was a picture of my face on the portfolio page of me during that time, and you can just see I'm just like pale white and a lot larger than I am currently. But I understand why people were concerned. But I'll say this, and it's related to photography. So when I got admitted to the hospital, there were 30 patients in the hospital, half on ventilators, half not. I wasn't. I was the only one lucid. I would interview the staff anytime they come in. They didn't know what to do with me because I was the only one lucid. I mean, not only was I lucid, but I wasn't sleeping, which was a danger. Um, and then I couldn't sleep because I'd have these experiences and stuff. But when I got into the hospital room, and at that time we didn't know what was going on in the hospitals. We didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. We were just kind of hearing about things. I felt like I was the perfect person to be there and to be of service to my community by documenting the experience of what it was like to be in the hospital during the height of COVID, from a patient perspective. And then I was, lucid enough part of the time to make notes about things and stuff. I mean, somewhere I've got a whole collection of videos I made. I thought the changes in our taste buds from having COVID were so interesting. So I'd make all these, describing the sensations and the flavors of things. It's like, this, I always wanted them to bring me sweet tea because the sweet tea tasted like water, but water tasted like chalk and just stuff like that. And so at first I started off documenting this experience of being in the hospital with COVID, but then I got the bonus of getting to, document all the psychosis, altered state stuff. And I'm still working through it because the first few, I knew that I had a special story there, but the first few years I got out of it, my family, it's taken a while to wrap my head around it. And my family was very unsupportive. They're like, people will think you're crazy. They'll never hire you. And I was like, well, I'm an artist. It's okay. Oh, and then this was the last one. This was fun. So I call this Battlestar Galactica Day. And it was this day where God, the way I experienced this, God came into my body, and when he did, my consciousness was displaced and it went into this machine. And it's weird because I have memories of what God did in my body. He calls my husband up at like 2 or 3 in the morning, panicking because he's lost my consciousness. He's like, it's so funny. I hope I have that recorded somewhere for Carl. But he's on the phone.
Poor Carl.
I can't find Carol. I can't find Carol. And he's like, just go lay down and go back to sleep. But my experience was that I started beeping one of the songs from Battlestar Galactica in this Dynamite machine and got God's attention. And I have a video clip because I have, because of my memory issues, basically trained myself and I guess whatever spirits come into my body to be OCD about documenting everything. I've got this clip where he runs to the dynamite machine in my body and it's like, oh my gosh, Carol, and he's talking to me and all this kind of stuff. And he's like, you're like the old Cylon model and I'm the new Cylon model. And that's a sci-fi reference to Battlestar Galactica, where the old Cylon models obviously were robots, but the new Cylon models looked just like people. You couldn't tell the difference. And, there's a lot to unpack there, but, there was a big message for me. And so even though like this whole experience, probably doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of other people, I've been able at this point in time to like work through it kind of like one would work through dream interpretation and to make sense of it and for it to affect my life. And then, just putting together more composites, like he made me pull, okay, I curse a lot, so sorry guys. He made me pull a fucking needle out of my arm. Like, oh, that was, and here's the thing, I was trying to stop it. I wanted it out so bad. Look how gross that thing looks. And I was panicking. And I remember, I don't know how I made it from my bed to the mirror in the bathroom, but when he ripped that needle out of my arm, I was so terrified. I was so terrified of that needle being ripped out of my arm. And then when he ripped it out, didn't hurt, didn't bleed. I felt like a badass. I mean, like, and it was just kind of one of those little lessons to me, reminding me that sometimes our fears are so much bigger than what it is we're afraid of. And the relief of finally pulling like the thorn out of your side that's been stabbing you. So it was, and this is one of those things where I'm still trying to figure out, how do I even talk about this experience to people? But I am, and it took me a while to actually start sharing some of this work. But I do want to say that I shared some at a local show that I was pretty nervous about. And when I went there, I had so many people come up to me and thank me for sharing this work. People who have had family members that have gone through experiences kind of like this. The story might be different, but whether it's psychosis, an altered state, like there are a lot of stories out there like that are untold, probably because people don't know how to talk about them. And so that was really meaningful. Time isn't real. It's a construct. lines. Oh yeah. I got so much good stuff. It was such an interesting experience because I've always been into psychology a little bit. I thought about studying it one time. And just to think about where did these ideas come from in my mind? Because there were things that came to me that came out of me I had never heard of or thought about before. Like time is a construct, it's in our mind and it's making us sick and stuff. And now I've learned a little bit about different forms of time and stuff, but I don't know. I'll be unpacking this probably the rest of my life.
There's a lot going on here.
I think the thing that's here, I had started to work with a couple of people to get some advice on how do I break this down? Because I have so many different stories in one. But, just going to creativity and stuff and storytelling, like I didn't know how to talk about this series. I'm from Alabama, where you learn to keep your mouth shut about your own spiritual or religious beliefs to avoid the drama that so many other people will bring in. And so I was scared to talk about it and to mention God and spiritual things and stuff like that, because my own beliefs are very different from a lot of the people that I know. And also I'm just very open. And it was a really interesting experience for me because at this time in my life, I wasn't particularly religious or spiritual. Now I would identify as spiritual, coming back out of the closet. It's like, okay, it's safe. It's safe to come back out of the closet now, but it's taken a long time to feel comfortable, especially in Alabama, talking about this kind of stuff. But what I have found is that if I'm sharing a story, the only way that I can share it is if I talk about it the way I experienced it, which is, whatever you believe is fine, but this is how I experienced it. And how I experienced it was God came into my body and shocked me awake and then kept talking to me and a whole bunch of other weird stuff happened. But, whatever your beliefs are, you always hear God works in mysterious ways. This was quite mysterious for me.
Yeah, well, I will say the level of energy that you brought out of this experience is really impressive, and I love like listening to you talk about it because there's so much here, and it's all coming straight from your heart, and it's just really really cool to see.
Well, Jim, to be honest, this is probably the most transformative experience of my life. I mean, and it's still, I've talked to you a little bit about this, but I mean, this basically like woke me back up spiritually, and I've begun to, explore all of these like psychic gifts and things like that, which thankfully society and science are catching up to and starting to be more accepting of. But it's one of those things where it's still really scary to talk about it, especially when you live in certain areas that haven't been that supportive. Being out west recently while I was traveling and visiting Arizona especially was really nice because there are a lot of spiritual communities out there that, are more embracing of these types of things. But I have seen so much change in the world since this experience, and not just the normal changes expected from COVID itself. But I mean, for a lot of people, and it makes sense, the pandemic, you go through a massive global trauma like that, it shakes a lot of people. It gives people time to think about what's important to them. It gives people time to reconnect with things. So I think it's a really exciting time to be alive. And so I feel really bad and kind of guilty whenever people mention about this really scary time. Because I mean, it was scary. I mean, like I was definitely crying, upset and all these things. But for me as an artist, I was like, this is a gift. This is a gift. I mean, like, I was gifted this story and this experience that, no other person on the planet has a story just like mine. And, a good story, human beings learn best through stories.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's just, I don't know. Yeah. So I'm very thankful. I'm very thankful for it.
Yeah, and you created a really fantastic body of work where you're able to combine all this evidence of the experience into these images. So
Yeah, trying to find that balance between but seeing is believing, or at least it was until AI. Now we don't know, but generally speaking, I'm an artist, but I also like to consider myself a scientist. I always have. And so I'm always documenting things like here is the evidence. And that's also my graphic design and my photography kind of like coming back together is okay, I'm problem solving, I'm gathering data, this is really overwhelming. So let me show people examples of what this looked like for me, so that to give them something to latch onto. And then I just hope that, then I just trust that some people might get something out of it and some of them won't, but that's okay. It's whoever's meant to get something out of this will get something out of it. It's not for everybody. So.
All right. Well, I know we're about 40 minutes in, and I feel like this is going to be a hard left turn, but I know that you're really interested in game-based learning. And
yes.
And I have my own copy of a game that you designed right here. This is Lumen. And this is just a really fun game. And maybe we could talk a little bit about this while we're kind of shifting gears a little bit.
Yes. Okay. So some of my passions are education and gaming. So storytelling goes into that as well. So what's on the screen right now is the version of this game that I did for my MFA project. So for my MFA thesis was on game-based learning. While teaching, and I've always been into games. I'm a lifelong gamer, and I have always understood that games are inherently educational. You learn different things from different games. You can learn something from every game, but when you can marry the gameplay mechanics with the content that you want to deliver or the skill that you want to deliver, that's where the magic happens. And we have a crisis in education. I mean, I think we've had this crisis for a while, but I was a very anxious undergrad student, and I had a lot of classmates that had anxiety and stuff, but it was nothing like the level of anxiety that I saw with my own students while teaching in grad school. And while teaching, okay, so in art school, photography, art, design, critique is one of the best ways to learn, but it's also one of the areas that people get really nervous about. I was there too. You're shy. You don't want to put your work up. You don't know how to talk about it. You don't feel confident talking about it. But when I got out of undergrad, it was the thing that I missed the most. And when I came back to grad school, one of the things that I hoped to do was to really, kind of help students understand and embrace critique more quickly so that they could jump in and benefit from it. But I ended up having students that I couldn't get them to say anything. I couldn't get them to interact with each other. And so I was trying to brainstorm a solution that would help them. And it ended up turning into my MFA thesis project. And I know from experience that games, especially in the classroom, tabletop games are a great way. They're a great icebreaker. It's a great way of bringing people together, of helping people feel comfortable with one another. And I had done a lot of thinking and some asking questions and stuff, trying to better understand why people were so nervous and hesitant. Because I think most human beings, we want to interact with other people. We just feel uncomfortable and don't know how, especially in the classroom environment. And I could tell that my students wanted to be social, but they just didn't know what to say and stuff. So, but when you bring in a game, and a game essentially is any activity that has a clear framework of instruction. So it tells people how they're supposed to interact with one another for a certain amount of time or something like that. Because people know exactly what's expected of them, it's a lot easier for them to relax and to then become part of the group. And then the other thing was you can use a game to simulate real world experiences. Like basically, like how can we simulate parts of the critique experience to kind of like prep and warm people up so that when we get to critique, they feel more confident. So Lumen is like, there's one deck of vocabulary terms, the idea being, okay, well, one of the things we can do to help students become more comfortable is help, boost their vocabulary so that they have a larger range of words to work with and they know what words mean. And then to give them practice analyzing images that aren't their own and aren't that of their classmates so that, they can practice and experience the benefits of talking about and kind of critiquing and discussing work as prep before doing that in the classroom. And hopefully by that point, they feel more comfortable with their classmates. They've got a little more vocabulary under their belt and it can go from there. But this was the version I made for my MFA thesis, which I thought I was just making a tool for myself. I didn't think about publishing at all. And then once I showed it off, everybody wanted it. There's a lot of pressure. And I was like, okay, I was just going through a weird period. I've been going through a weird transition period in my life. It's like, all right, well, I guess I could spend the next couple of years figuring out how to manufacture a game, start a business,
And you did.
Yeah. So it's been my active service for the photography community and education community. I love it, and it's a work of passion, but it's not what I expected to be doing, but I'm so thankful for it. And so if you go to Blackwater Bucks, you can see the current version. Because when I put this out for my MFA project, let me just say, I was developing this and playtesting it during the pandemic. So they were still, even though it played fine, there were some changes that needed to be made, and then time to, get the design better and stuff. And when I had that extra time after grad school to go, make this better, I did a call for submissions for photography. I got a bunch of photos from people from SPE and some of my photography friends and stuff like that. Because the version that I did for my MFA thesis was just stock photography because that's all I had time to do. But it was very special to me to get to include so many images, and I included some of my own images as well by friends and colleagues and people I respect, because it makes it more fun for me when I play this and for be like, oh hey, I know this person's work. This is fun.
Mm-hmm.
But so it's just vocabulary cards. It plays, basically each round a vocabulary card is read. Everyone else has a deck of photo cards, and you submit the photo card that best matches the vocabulary card. And then during the judging phase, there's some conversation that takes place about, why'd you pick this out of these? And then there's usually like some playful debate and discussion. And one of the things that I really like about the game that I have seen over and over again is a lot of times people will be surprised by what people pick. And I thought that was a really powerful and good lesson, because critique is subjective. And people's preferences, and then hearing people express why they think certain ways, enlightens you to other ways of seeing, maybe makes you think a little bit more about, oh, well, okay, and now I understand why this person picked this one, because they come from this kind of background or this kind of interest area and stuff. And so
yeah, so I sent you some pictures recently, but I did use this in one of my most recent classes, and they seemed to really enjoy it. I had that problem where people were they would just say they like it, but they couldn't explain why. And one day I decided, okay, before we go into critique, we're going to go sit in the lobby and we're going to play this as a group. And you know what? I'm going to pull up some pictures because I did.
Oh yeah, please do.
Yeah, I did set them aside for you for this. So give me 1 second.
I love seeing, one of the best things about creating this game is seeing other people smiling and having a good time while they're playing it. And I've even played it with photography professors at SPE, and it's just it makes you feel so good to help create an experience that brings other people together.
Yeah. So these are my students from last semester, and I think one of them is explaining why he chose that card over the other. Probably could have caught them making better faces. Oops. But they're having.
I like to go in the background just like this.
Yeah.
You're going to start pointing.
But they seem to have a good time.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then we went back into the critique, and I remember them like using some of the terms. They're like, they were like, this one is moody, or dark or whatever it was. Like, I can't remember what the word was, but they were dropping the terms that they had just used in the game, which was pretty cool to see.
That is awesome to hear. And when you go into the classroom and you go into a critique situation, it's such you're switching into like a different state. I think, just reviewing a quick list of vocabulary to help jog people's memory before a critique, if nothing else, would also be incredibly useful, just because like it is, you're going from functioning in like the normal world to now we're going to hyper focus and get really nitpicky and detailed on photography. What language are we speaking again? We kind of need to remind them. Here's the language.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some of the cards I have out in front of me. Like I've got motion blur, selective focus, rule of thirds, harmony, surreal, and then I've got this like all these cards here.
Okay. All right. Let's okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna play a game real quick. Okay, I'm gonna read a word, and you're just gonna pick a card. And I just want you to sell me on your choice. I want you to pick 2 cards. Show me both and just pick them randomly.
Okay.
And then sell me on one of them. Doesn't matter what it is. Okay. Mysterious, having an atmosphere of strangeness or secrecy, difficult or impossible to understand, explain, or identify.
Okay. So you want me to pick
I just want you to randomly pick 2 cards, and then you just have to sell me on one. Because you don't know what someone's going to give you.
Okay. All right. So I have pulled 2 cards, and I have it looks like a person on a swing in front of a waterfall, and then I have what appears to be an octopus, kind of swimming through the ocean. And the word was what again? Mystery?
Mysterious.
Mysterious. Well, gosh, I could see how you could explain this one as mysterious, because why is there this swing in front of this waterfall? Where are we? That's pretty mysterious. And then, to see this like alien-like creature that I assume, is just doing its thing across the ocean floor. I mean, that's also pretty mysterious. But and you're going to pick which one is the most mysterious?
No, I'm going to make you pick which one.
Okay. I think I am going to go with this octopus, because octopuses are creatures of mystery. I think they live these lives that are incredibly intelligent, and I think I would choose this one.
Wait, hold the other image up again. Okay, so this is the part of the game I always like, is the conversation. So and this is kind of interesting because the octopus, especially with the dark background, the color, it viscerally is like hitting it like right away. But then when you start talking, for me, when you start talking about where is this woman? What is that swing attached to?
I have no idea.
What is she doing?
That is pretty mysterious.
That one is like, so this is one, it's like, there is no wrong choice. It just depends like where you're coming from. And it's so fun to see other people kind of, share or reveal where they're coming from or what their thought process is. Because I mean, sometimes I kind of feel like for me, the chair one is more mysterious, but the octopus one hits me right away, which to me is a reminder of the power of color and association. So that was a good one. One.
So we play this as a family with my 2 daughters, and I really like it because they're learning words that they didn't know the meaning of, and like we'll read the meaning, like surreal, and surreal, marked by intense irrational reality of a dream, or unbelievable and fantastic. And they learn these words through trying to match it up with photographs. I think that's just super cool.
Thank you. I do think so. Sometimes I feel weird. I've gotten a lot of praise about the game, and that it's it's one of those things. It's like I've never been someone that was. I like to make things, and I want them to be awesome. But don't tell me, because then I feel awkward. I'm trying to overcome that. But part of it has also been, so when it comes to game design, so this isn't the first game I've designed, and it's the first one that I've published. But you either start with mechanics or theme first. And in this case, I knew what I wanted to do was to kind of simulate the critique experience or some sort of essence of it, but I didn't know what the mechanics should look like. And one of the ways of researching and figuring that out is I played a whole lot of different games and thought about how I might adapt those mechanics. And this game essentially plays almost exactly like Cards Against Humanity, and it's such an easy game format. You're just reading something and taking. So there's part of me that, like, when I finally figured out the mechanics for it, I was frustrated because, like, it's like, oh, this is so obvious. This is so like this is such a simple thing, but it took a lot of work to get there and to marry it. And at that time, and I think I have started to see some more games where they're doing more with you're analyzing images or you're using images to communicate. But at that time, I wasn't aware of any. And I think that I have plans to create other versions of Lumen in the future because it could be replicated for any visual media and adjusted, and it's just such a fun and effective way to learn and to have an icebreaker that brings people together. So I feel like I just got really lucky with it, and I'm like, all right, thank you.
Real quick, if somebody's looking to get a copy of Lumen, what's the best way to do that?
You can go to my website, blackwaterbucks.com. I think it's along the bottom of the screen right now, bucs.com. There's a link to the store there. The version of the game that's out is a small run education edition. So it's a bit pricey. So please ask it's not intended for the general public. I was planning to do a Kickstarter later this year, but that is on hold until we figure out what's going on with the tariffs. Because, right now, I'll say one of the most challenging parts of trying to actually manufacture a game is trying to get it to be as affordable as possible. And you can't do that unless you're manufacturing thousands and thousands of copies. As someone completely new to this business, I like to, what, I'll just do 500 copies and try and kickstart this later. So we'll see. But for the time being, yes, blackwaterbucks.com. And I do want to add that there is a print to play version. So you print it yourself and cut it. I think it's $10 in the store, but if you sign up for my newsletter, which I don't send out, you can get it for free. It's like about a third the size of the game. And one of my goals is to eventually have a variety of tools and things that are both free or like really as inexpensive as possible so that the educators can have access to them. And I'm working on another photography game right now. I'm working on a photo ethics game with Savannah Dodd, who's the founder of the International the Photography Ethics Center, and Dana Thompson, who is president of the International Association for Visual Literacy. And we just submitted like our research type thing to a conference that we're hoping to present at. And we're trying to see if we can explore like getting a grant to produce some of these games to basically teach people more about ethics in photography. And so I'm excited to be collaborating with them on this because one of my goals and my dreams is to collaborate with other educators on creating tools that can be used in the classroom. So,
well, I look forward to seeing what comes of that.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So we've covered trauma and COVID and games, and I guess, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is what sorts of things are coming up in the future here?
Well, photography wise, I am working on this photo ethics game, but I finally started a project that I think is embracing a lot of the things that I'm most excited about with photography. I think we've got one image. You can pull up the Prometheus's Gift. So for me, and I think that this series also kind of reflects some of the transformations going on in my life since COVID, pushing past form and looking more at the essence of things, moving more into abstract art and that sort of thing. And this image is the first of a series that I've been working on since last summer. I didn't have a plan, but I went to Japan last year on a pilgrimage of sorts. And while partway through my trip, I just really started thinking about energy and essence and motion, that everything is energy. And one of the things that influenced this is I started making dance videos for TikTok several years ago. And that art form of exploring motion and movement, and then all of the spiritual stuff that's connected to that for me, in terms of, there is more to existence and to the universe than what we can see. sort of influenced me to be more aware of the energy when I visit places. Like I'm really sensitive to energy and it feels really different. And so for me, for this series, I was traveling around Japan and I would go to different areas. And sometimes I would listen to whatever music was playing there, which might have just been like the sound that the city makes in the cars. Or sometimes I'd have my music in and I'd be listening to music. But my goal of this was to go into to go into different places and to just completely relax my body and to let the energy of the atmosphere and of whatever I'm listening to help me like dance with the camera. So I'm using intentional camera movement. Usually with light painting, you're moving the light source. But for me, I'm using intentional camera movement and I'm dancing with the camera and I'm moving the lens in different ways to capture the essence of what I'm feeling in the moment. And I got so many, when I started looking through my images, I have some stories that I'm kind of writing fictional stories to a lot of them. But for me as an artist, I feel like I've just been telling my own stories and doing things that are very straightforward. I feel like this abstract light and motion exploration of energy is the first time for me as an artist that I have felt really excited. Like I have finally dug into something, that feeds my soul a little bit, or that my soul wants to express, because you can't recreate these images. Like it is it's the moment that you're there. And yes, you have to take a lot to get some good ones. But the more you practice, the more you kind of get like, okay, I'm learning how to kind of get this effect, or what kind of situations are best for this. But it has been really special to me, and I'm so excited to work on more of this series. I was shooting some more for this a few months ago, but I have like a lot of stuff to go through from Japan. And what I'm hoping to do with this is, once I kind of like finish my set that is from Japan, is what I'd like to do is I'd like to travel around to other places and capture the energy of those places or those moments. So that's where I'm hoping to go with it.
All right. Well, I'm excited to see it.
Thank you.
All right. So speaking of energy, and as we're getting close to the end here, I kind of was wondering if you could talk to me about some of the sort of like spiritual dancing that you're doing on your social media. And I'm going to go ahead and switch over here just so we can get a sense of what we're talking about here. And this is your Instagram. So I'll throw that up there. What's going on with some of this stuff, Carol?
So about 2.5 years ago, I just got the urge one night to get up and play with TikTok and to make a dance video. And I've always loved to dance. And in fact, I have always danced with my hands, but I wouldn't let other people see me. I felt too weird. It's too different. I couldn't show that. And dance has become a very important spiritual and creative practice for me. So dance has been used as a spiritual tool for a long time. And thanks to my COVID experiences and the experiences I've had since then, now know that I would be labeled what is considered a trance channeler, which is when you go into a trance state and are channeling, whatever you want to put to it, being, energy, consciousness from somewhere else, or a deeper part of your psyche. And anyways, I use dance as a tool to help me with that. So dancing has been its own form of a creative exercise. For me, the way I have approached it is it's an exercise in surrender. I'm trying to turn my brain off and basically go into an active form of meditation. So it's called active meditation because my body is moving, but what I'm doing is I'm allowing my body to just move to the energy or the music that it's feeling, which is what I'm doing in my new photography series as well, is turning off my mind, and not looking at something and being like, okay, I'm going to try and get this to result. Instead being like, okay, I'm going to relax and I'm going to let however my body wants to move with the camera, my hands go on. And the dancing has just like completely transformed my life and my interest. And talking about where I'm going in the future, I'm studying music right now. I'm planning to study acting. I've been really enjoying being more in front of the camera and less behind it, though I do still very much enjoy directing or planning things. So a lot of my videos are spontaneous on the spot. I don't know where I'm at, or I'll just go find some cool place to dance and I'll just turn on whatever the first song is. Sometimes I've done some planned stuff. Sometimes one of my guys helps me with filming or friends. But it's just been such an exciting thing to explore, and just kind of thinking about my own like personal artistic evolution, going from studying art and graphic design and photography, visual communication, to now exploring video and motion. And then also when I have time, I love playing with all of the tacky effects. And it's probably the graphic designer in me rebelling. Like, I'm the rebellious sort. Sometimes I like making stuff that looks really weird just because I know most of my friends are designers and artists and I just want to mess with them. I don't but I love it. I love it when people are like, what are you doing? What is this? And I have so many people that will comment and be like, I have no idea what you're doing, but I love it. And so, but because of this, explore motion, explore energy. And then also it feels so good to move my body and to not be behind a computer 40 hours a week. So
should I click on one of these just so people can see what?
Do the one to the right of the thing that says God. The one down right there.
Okay, this one here?
This one's sort of I was at a spiritual retreat, and this one was sort of like a meditation dance thing with a pine cone. I love pine cones. And so for this, I had that pine cone. I feel like pine cones give off a lot of energy, but I was just letting my body kind of move with it and be guided. There was no plan. Sometimes I won't know. Sometimes my brain wants to try and guess where my body's going to go. My body's like, nope, you guessed wrong. And so now if you want to close that one and click to one of the higher energy ones.
Okay.
And then, you know what? The one to the left, click on it, because one of the things, yes, click on it. One of the things I am still figuring out. So I'm still in my exploratory phase. I love dancing with the camera and thinking about, and I'm still exploring it and figuring out, but thinking about how that motion, when you have not just the subject, but also the camera in motion and moving together, and how, and you're thinking about the fact that someone's watching this on a flat screen. Sometimes I'm like, let me take you dancing with me. And like the movement of the hand, it's so interesting how movement gets translated into other people's bodies just visually. So this is this is an example of that. And then, I do a lot of different things, but this is one of my fun, geeky things. I'm like, I know there's got to be a scientific term out there for this somewhere. And I want to figure out what it is, because I want to learn more about that, because it just, and maybe you can identify with this, Jim. As an artist, when you get so used to working on things that are flat or just on a screen, it's so nice to do something where either you're creating something physical that people are going to interact with, or you're creating, in this case, like video stuff with motion and energy that also has some sort of interaction. So, dance is life. I may be quitting my career as an artist and just becoming a dancer. We'll see.
Well, I always enjoy when I'm like scrolling through and I come across one of your dance videos. I'm like, oh, where's Carol at now?
It's a great excuse. It's a great excuse to get out and explore the world. You need different backdrops and settings.
Yeah, I know you've posted quite a few kind of all over lately. So,
video is so fun to experiment with, and the shorts, and sometimes I do the effects with, sometimes I wear costumes, sometimes it's the atmosphere, and as someone going from primarily doing photography, like I didn't used to take a lot of home movies. I always just took pictures. Now I take a lot more home movies too, and I do journals and stuff, because you can see, or like, this is some fun. This is a practical effect. It's an actual prism clipped over the camera, and just playing with the light. And I think one of my favorite things about video is you can kind of show off more light tricks than you can in just a still photograph. Because it'll kind of move and stuff. And I don't know. It's just, I feel like video is the natural evolution of photography. Not to say that it replaces it. it depends on what you're trying to communicate. But if you're like me and you're high energy and you have a lot to say and express, then I feel like video is really, like, I've always loved photography, because to me, photography is magic. I remember when I was a little kid, I came up with my own definition for magic, and I was basically like, light is magic. I'm always looking at light, light, the absence of light, well, video is just capturing even more of it, and it's capturing it in motion, which is really exciting.
And in time. Yeah.
Yeah, in time. And then, sometimes I'm such a geek. I like to think of myself as a time traveler. One of the things I've done with some of my videos is I do the same songs over and over again. And I like to go and splice them together with songs from the past, especially since I've gone through a big physical change in the last few years. I had weight loss surgery and lost about 80 pounds. Just a huge difference. Well, I still like to show fat me, lots of love. So I've made some videos where I go and I take this heavier dance videos of me and thinner, and I'm singing love songs to myself.
Is there one here? Is there one close, do you think?
It's probably not close to here.
Okay.
I make 15 to 30 videos a day.
I know.
I think just try and share a little bit here or there.
Yeah. Well, I know when I've been out with you at SP, you'll give Carl your phone and all right, doing a dance, and you'll just kind of go off and do your thing, and everybody's kind of watching and you don't care. It's just, it's great.
And here's the thing. I do feel self-conscious, and it's not that I don't care, but I want to share this. I love it more than I'm afraid of being seen doing it. And that, because when I first started dancing, I was just doing it in my room. And I remember the first time I made a dance video in public, and I tried to be as discreet as possible. I was in Nashville on a bridge, and I was just to the side, and I was just moving around. I didn't want anybody to see how awkward and stuff. I didn't want the attention. I still struggle with the attention a little bit. I'm way more comfortable behind a screen than in person, but that is something that I want to conquer and I want to get better at. But finding something that you love, and that gives you the motivation and the passion to push past your fear, because every time I go out in public, I feel nervous and I'm a little afraid. What not only what people are thinking, or am I being too weird? Am I trespassing? But also just, there's a vulnerability that happens, especially when you're kind of performing. And for me, my goal is usually, I do think of it like a performance, but a lot of times my goal for me is to take as much off as possible and to really be there in the moment and stuff. And I just don't know I don't know the words to express how special it has been to find something that I love so much that it helps me conquer those fears, and how much I wish that other people could find something like that. I think it's a Brandon Flowers song called Crosswords. And in it, there's a line that says, and our dreams will be bigger than our fears, or conquer our fears. And I like that idea of us, our dreams or our passions, what motivates us. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the thing despite the fear. It's a lot easier to be brave when what you're doing, when you love it and it makes you happy and it brings you joy. And yeah, so I do really love it.
Well, I guess this is a good point to transition. I like to usually end each show with advice, and you've kind of offered a lot there about sort of taking risks and finding something that you love. But I was wondering, is there any other advice you'd like to part the viewers with?
Well, there's so much advice out there. It depends on what your goals are, but I think for me, there's two things I want to share. One is one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given as a student by a professor. And that was that you don't have to be the most talented. You don't have to be the most talented. You don't even have to be naturally talented. You just have to keep showing up. You just have to keep showing up and doing the thing, because you can be the most talented person in the world. But if you're not applying yourself or putting yourself out there, then it doesn't matter. It's those people that are actually putting themselves out there. And that was a big one for me, because I did not feel like the best student, especially at that time, but it gave me hope. But I think for me, the advice that I most want to share with people is to be yourself, to stop trying to copy or mimic other people, to follow other people's paths. And sometimes you have to kind of do that for a while in order to figure out, what you're interested in and what you're not interested in. But, I like to encourage people, what are the really interesting nitpicky things that you're passionate about? What are some of your strengths that you're aware of? What are the things that you're scared to share but that make you so happy? And how can you let those things guide you? I think that it's our differences that make us interesting, and that we should embrace those differences, and express them, and we should be excited to express them, and not afraid like so many of us have been for a long time. So what if someone thinks you're weird? Not everyone has to like the work that you create. When I'm a quality versus quantity person, despite how many dance videos I put out. But when it comes to things that are important, like having a few quality people that really appreciate your art, I guess just as an artist, it's like, as an artist, art's not something that you do to make money. Like, if you can make money from it, then great. But art, just talking about art and being an artist, is something that you do because you have to, because there's some piece of your soul or your spirit that won't rest unless you do it. And sometimes you got to have some life experiences to get there. But I think once you find that thing, or you find like a little nugget that leads you there, I think that's when your life starts getting really exciting, at least for you. And ultimately, I think most art is art that you should make for yourself first, to express stuff. So there's my long-winded advice.
No, I don't think anybody would ever argue that you don't show up and be yourself, and I think that's what everybody loves about you. So, and I think the rest of us should take some cues from that for sure.
It's hard though, not just for me. Yeah, I think people think it comes easy for me, but it doesn't necessarily come easy for me. It's been a life of struggle, a life of struggle to break free of societal constructs. I get some big words in here. But it's also been one of those things, like this past year, like I'm ADHD, I'm bipolar, and I finally was officially diagnosed as autistic. And I didn't want to be diagnosed at first, because personally, I'm like, I don't need somebody else to tell me who and what I am. However, it was my whole life I felt different. And like, my dancing is also partially, it's a stimming thing. Like if I don't dance, I get overstimulated and my body will start moving on its own. If I go dance and I release that energy, it's a way for me to keep myself at a level that's not too overwhelming for most people. And that is more okay for me. But like, it took a long time, because most of my life, I'm like, why am I so different? And then, to me, getting my diagnosis, was confirmation that there's not actually something wrong with me. I'm just different. That's how I feel about it. There's not something wrong with me. I'm just different. I wasn't a duck. I was a blackbird, or whatever, word it's like, okay. And now my family finally understands me a little bit better too. So that's been super helpful. So it's been freeing in a way.
Well, I mean, that's great. I mean, being free is what we all want, right?
Fingers crossed.
Well, Carol, thank you so much for spending the evening here talking with me about all of your work and experiences. And I hope that people are watching, they're learning some great things and taking some of that with them as they move on with their lives. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Jim.
All right. Well, that is a wrap for episode 14. And thank you again, Carol. And I hope that you guys see us on the next episode. Thanks. If you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and leave us a comment. It helps us connect with more photography lovers just like you.